Sometimes when we're making history, when we're living in the legacy, we don't realize it. We need to pause right now, and I want to remind you that you are creating a legacy. Dr. Sintley's last book, writing 50 years, más o menos, amongst the gringos. Can I say that? Can I say that on? I'm not sure. I think the FCC said I could say that. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. This was his latest book, published here in San Antonio at Aztlan Libre Press. We were so happy to host the national launch of his book right when we were opening the Latino Bookstore. And I did not know that this would be the last time that he visits our bookstore. I did not know that this would be the last book that he publishes. But I am so blessed that I personally knew him as a friend. I do want to mention now, for all the folks from Nuestra Palabra, Latino Writers Having Their Say, desde Houston, Texas, going back 25 years. Roberto was one of the first nationally published writers who we hosted at Nuestra Palabra in Houston, Texas. And Nuestra Palabra used to convene in the party hall of Chapultepec restaurant, you know, back in the day, ¿verdad? Y la gente decía, you know, there's no interest in Latino literature. ¿Verdad? I mean, they would say there's not enough Latino writers. They say la gente no le interesa. I'm so proud that we've united with Dr. Sintley, with all of you, to prove all of them wrong. And me da mucho orgullo estar con ustedes. Why? Because we know if we don't do it, it doesn't happen. What is that legacy? If we wait for corporate bookstores to decide where the bookstores go, which books are sold, there would not be a bookstore here. If you have a chance, when you're on your phone, Google bookstores in San Antonio. You're going to see an invisible line. All the bookstores are to the north in the city. ¿Verdad? What does that mean? We've united to defy those barriers. And I'm so happy that we've united to make sure that this book is here. When the high school students from Lanier want to come over, when the teachers from Breckenridge, where we were this morning, come over, they can get a copy of this book and benefit from the knowledge, his humor, and his legacy that we've all united. So tonight is an honor of all their legacies, but today, Dr. Sintley. Dr. Sintley. And we've got a room full of Texas Poet Laureates. I don't think there's any left in the state. Carmen Tafolla, we got a San Antonio Poet Laureate, Octavio, Texas Poet Laureate, Irene. So there's no muses left. We've taken all the muses from the state. Aquí están. So, qué lindo, qué bonito. And then I do want to remind you, too, that the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center is the overview sponsor of the Latino Bookstore. And every second Friday of the month, we're going to have special events. So coming up in September 8th, we're going to have the awesome book, The Bard and the Borderlands, an anthology of Shakespeare appropriations in La Frontera, and also Ito Romo with the soft copy publication of his book. And then on October 13th, I think John is here. John is here, ¿verdad? John will be featuring his book. And then Jen will be back because you wrote the profile on Carmen, right? So we're living the books on Chicana Profiles with Norma E Cantu, también. And here's what I want to stress too. I love that the authors come when they're not in the spotlight. ¿Verdad? Why? Están apoyando otros. They're sharing the space. They're supporting other writers. And that means so much because that shows the support that everybody has. And then I do want to mention some of the sponsors, of course, San Antonio, also San Antonio, the Mellon Foundation, Texas Commission for the Arts, Nuestra Palabra, Gemini Inc., Ford Foundation, the City of San Antonio Department of Arts and Culture, and then all of you for coming to support this event. So tonight, we're going to have two authors, and we're going to begin, and I'll give a longer introduction to Octavio. We're going to begin with Octavio Quintanilla. He'll be reading poems from his book, If I Go Missing. And then we're going to hear him tell us why Ala Brava Press is publishing Surrogate Eater by Jen Yáñez-Alaniz. Because, again, here's the next level of legacy, ¿verdad? And tonight isn't about just getting the books, which you should. You know, get a lot of books, give them away, get them signed. But it's more about the story. So when this is on your family library, you're going to talk about, well, I got my book signed by Jen, but I remember there were 3 poet laureates in the room. I remember it was the evening that they celebrated Dr. Seatley. It could be where also, thank you so much for the support from Center for Mexican American Studies, from Our Lady of the Lake. They'll be bringing 40 faculty members to this campus this month so that we can keep working together and keep accelerating all the work that we do. So I mention all that because that's really what we have to tell people when they say what goes on there. You're sharing more, not just the book, but those stories and the community that we're building to defy more and more barriers as time goes on and gain more and more support. We also have lesson plans. We're actually working on lesson plans for Warrior Girl by Carmen Tafolla. So that means in September, yes, round of applause for Warrior Girl. Here's the last thing I'll say before I introduce Octavio. Thank you to the office of Congressman Joaquin Castro. We got a grant, and with that grant, we're paying teachers in the classroom to write curriculum guides about books by our authors that are here from the community that showcase here. So in September, when we celebrate Carmen's new book, there will be lesson plans that we give away. When she goes to a school visit, the class she visits, they will all get a copy of her book to students that day. That school will get a classroom set of the books, and then the students get a coupon. That's a Culture Club coupon. If they come that night, they can get a free book that evening as well. So we want to flood the West Side with books. Alguien me dijo que I sound like a preacher sometimes, but that's okay. I don't gotta be cool. Why? Because my friends are cool. I got really cool friends. And you're about to hear one of them throw down. And you take him for granted. Why? Porque es de San Antonio. He's been your poet laureate. I was walking through a park and I saw his name immortalized in cement. I too. And of course, I really think the world of him. Why? Because he does what all of us do. He gives back. So the time he could be spending writing his next book, editing his next book, he gives that time to organize VersoFrontera. Round of applause for that. I'm so happy that tonight we get to recognize him as a poet, to celebrate his work. I look forward to hearing with you poems from If I Go Missing. Please welcome Octavio Quintanilla.
Hello, everybody. I'm trying not to smile, but I can't stop smiling. Can you all hear me? Yeah, all right. So all summer, I didn't do any readings. I didn't do any presentations. So I feel like this is new to me, and it feels good. What I want to do is read from my first, well, first of all, thank you, Tony. Thank you to the Guadalupe, to the bookstore, to community that's here. I know most of you, a lot of familiar faces, and if I don't know you, and I hope I get to talk to you a bit before you go. I want to thank just everybody, my friends, people who have read my work before I present it to you. There's a lot of process, and it's so freaking hot out there. So I want, oh yeah, and also I just want to dedicate this reading to friends and scholars who are not here anymore. Dr. Sinkley, Wendy Barker, Greg Barrios, Rose Catakalos, spirits who always supported our community, our writing community. So I just want to say thank you to them, and I hope they know that we remember them. And as long as we keep saying their names, they'll be in our memory. Once you stop saying their name, they'll be gone forever. So what I want to do, I want to read a few poems from If I Go Missing, and I think I'm going to read about 15 minutes, right, Tony? Or something like that. A couple of poems from If I Go Missing, just for the hell of it. It's an old book. It's from 2014. And then I want to read new poems from the new manuscript that's coming out from Texas Review Press. And thank you. I'm excited about that. Exclusive, coming out in the fall of 2014. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm still living in 2014. This book gave me hell, man. So, so I'm excited about that, and I'll read some of those poems and talk a bit about it, and then I'll say a few words about A La Brava Press and the mission that we have and what we want to do with the press, and also maybe a few words about VersoFrontera. And they're all working together. It's like, you know, no, I'm not going to say that. I was going to quote John Donne, but I'm not. Three entities working together. You probably know what I'm talking about. So this book took a long time to write also, maybe about 8 years to write. And a lot of the poems I wrote during my PhD studies, my dissertation. And the poems are about a place. They're about South Texas. They're about the Rio Grande Valley. They're about the Frontera. And what I wanted to do was create a character, a speaker that gave an idea to those who do not live there, the type of sensibilities that exist in the borderland. You know, it's not all despair. It's not all poverty. It's not all lack of imagination. You know, there are kids like me who were reading Dostoevsky, you know, from the public libraries, who were reading Camus, Kafka, who were dreaming big, you know. So I think this is a book about place. So let me read Carcass, South Texas Dirt Road. You still remember how it looked after the drizzle licked it clean. What the hell was it? Blades of grass taking the place of teeth. The wind snout sniffing sockets for a light long gone. You must have been 9 years old enough to know that dust is raised to fall on dust again, old enough to keep secrets. Years turned horror into poetry. Maybe you want to go back to the wood frame house sitting on concrete blocks, to the mutt you saved from drowning in a canal, to the girl who had no faith in you. She had a pretty yard. Her father worked for the city. Maybe you don't want to remember her, or that your father was without legal papers, all day digging trenches for plumbers, always walking on the dusty Colonia road that darkened when wet, like a monument for old bones. The book's divided into 3 parts, so I'll read one more from part 1. You know, they're kind of like narrative, lyrical poems, and then I'll read one from part 2 or so. And this is called Matanza del Marrano. I don't know if you ever went to the ranchos in Mexico, you know, back in the day, back in the late 70s. Visit grandparents. There was no electricity in the ranchos. There was no running water. You had to walk to the river to get water or from the well. And my grandparents, every time we visited or family came to visit, they would slaughter like an animal. You know, a pig or a goat. And if it was a big celebration, you know, a cow or something. I don't know. So this poem has to do with tradition and legacy and what happens to those legacies when you come to a new country. Sorry, I got to drink water. Matanza del Marrano. I wrote, I guess. So I'm going to read one, and then I'll go to my second part. This poem inside a poem, it can be found in the poem The Left Hand. I am night, a drowning man, a boy, God. I'm a river. Dip into me. I have time to find you. Ride the ocean. Drown. So as you can see, Tony mentioned he could have been home writing this next book. I already started writing it inside this one. So now let me read a few poems from the Book of Wounded Sparrows that will come out in the fall of 2024. It took about 10 years to write. I mean, to get it to where it is. You know, I started writing most of the poems little by little after this book was published. And I just know that my next book won't take 10 years, okay? Otherwise, I'll be like 89 and this book is everything that I wanted to write in this book. But of course, I didn't have the experience as a writer. I didn't have the language to write about trauma. I didn't have the tools, you know? So that's why I think it took so long, which speaks to the process of being a writer, you know, and to the commitment, right? In order to understand the poems, well, I don't have to tell you this to understand the poems, but I think there will be hopefully a deeper emotional connection if I tell you the context. Even though I was born in Texas, I lived in Mexico till I was 9 with my parents. my siblings. And then when I turned 9, my little brother and I, who was 8 and I was 9, we came to live with my grandmother in Westlake, Texas. Anybody been to Westlake, Texas? Some of you? And we came to live with her. Her husband had just died. So it's like everything just clicked. My parents wanted us to get a better education. We had the golden ticket in the small town in Mexico. You know, we're American citizens. My father was a farmer, you know, 2nd grade education. So they were visionaries. They knew they were gonna sacrifice, but they also knew that they had the opportunity to break the cycle of where we came from. Which, you know, as a boy, I mean, I remember just being happy. And somebody said that as a boy, you don't really, if you're happy and loved, you really don't remember that you were poor and that you were lacking things, right? So, so this book is about that. It's about that dislocation, separation of family, and what that means, and how we write about it, and how sometimes language itself is not enough to write about those kind of things. That's why the book is going to have 20 images, which is going to work as a book within a book. So I'll read a couple of poems from here, 2 or 3 poems. Writing a poem is almost like climbing a tree. No, I don't want to read that one. Sorry. I took it out, but that was not the plan to read that one first. I want to read a poem that gives you context, or more context. Sorry, okay, here you go. The Poetics of Separation, a micro essay. Poetry remembers that distance is made of suffering. Distance between blood cells, between 2 words on this page, between a mother and a son. And so I carry the distance of my past like a bag full of dirt, but I can't make words grow out of it and write what I can't remember. What is the Spanish word for water? What is the Spanish word for longing? What is the Spanish word for failure? My relationship with language is absence, one I can't shape with my hands, not like clay or fire. I try. And for this trying, I rely on what my body thinks it knows. I allow it to speak to that part of me for which I'll never have words. This poem doesn't want to tell you a story that you can follow. It wants to take you to a river, blindfold you, lower you into its veins. And you don't have to clap either. Let the poem do the work. Let the poem do the work. Parting. There was a time I had no word for darkness, and so I said darkness. I had no word to say devotion, and so I said 2 sons grieving 1 mother. A time came when our parents sat under a tree and sobbed for us, their sons on their way to a new country. When I tried to return to my boyhood, sometimes I end up a grown man with my head on my mother's lap. Now, I'll read one more, because I don't want to make you cry and stuff. I'll read something, I guess a little lighter. I don't. You'll decide what that means. It's a poem that references. It's called "Poem About Not Dying," with references to the movie Blood In, Blood Out. Have you seen that movie? Anyone? Some of you? All right, so what, 92, right? I think that's when I graduated. Poem about not dying with references to the movie Blood In, Blood Out. It's hard to write a funny poem about a movie where a young boy dies with a needle in his arm. In a city where Ratos Locos forever means that you're on the clock, bitch, and midnight is coming. That's a quote from the movie. Where it means that no one gets to truly raise a family, and all the family you have could backstab you when you least expect it, or will die for you, because this is the only way they can show their love. But love is everywhere, just like in every neighborhood, in every barrio, there must be a pine tree waiting for us to return. It doesn't have to be a pine tree. Any tree would do, but one on which one of our working class forefathers, just before the horizon swelled with twilight, carved their initials with a pocket knife right in its heart's center. For months now, I watched the same movies over and over till I memorized the lines the dying speak just before they close their eyes forever in a make-believe world that sometimes spills into my dreams. Dreams where I'm driving fast and reckless like El Gallo Negro, and my immigrant father dying in the back seat, asking for a drink of water, his last, he says, before he closes his eyes to this earth and opens them to see a new world where everyone is a stranger, and words are birds whose flight no one understands. Next time you see birds, think of them as words we never say to each other, like I miss you and I love you and don't go. See the sky speak with birds all along the dirt roads where we try to leave a trace of who we are, and hear them speak along the grain fields that brighten against the long horizon like low flames, or like the small fire a gun spits out of its mouth into the air to remind us that it's just a movie, that no one dies here, and we all go home. Thank you all. That was just a taste. There's like 100 pages of poems. Thank you. So that was my fun poem, my lighthearted poem. So I'm also here to briefly introduce Jen Yáñez-Alaniz, someone who I don't know, how long have we known each other? A few years. We slowly become friends, literary friends. She's getting her PhD at UTSA. She's a community organizer too. I mean, she does all kinds of things to promote literature and to promote just inclusivity, specifically with people who are not necessarily from this country, you know, to welcome them, immigrants, exiles, etc. So she's doing a lot of great work. And I guess I slowly found out that she was a poet. And I don't know, I read a few poems from her and I didn't really pay him no mind. Finally, I would go here. I guess I heard you read a few times, and every time it just got better. And I start, you know how sometimes you go to a reading and you're there, you listen to a few words, but you don't really follow everything because your mind is somewhere else. I think most of the time I went to readings, that's how I was. I'm kidding. Until I wasn't. That's the thing. Until you're like, okay. And then she said she was going to go on a tour with new Texas Poet Laureate, Irene Lara Silva, who's here. Thank you for being here, Irene. Came from Austin. And she said, I'm thinking of self-publishing a little chapbook put together. I'm like, oh, okay. But you know what happens if you self-publish and nobody really looks at your work with a critical eye? It's shit, right? Most of the time. Or at least the ones I've looked at. And so I said, why don't we work together for a bit and work on your poems? And she was, from what I understand, John was helping you edit and revise, who did a great, amazing job. And then I got that draft, and then we worked a bit more on it. And this is what came out. It's a beautiful little book, and we have copies here. What's cool about it is that it's a limited edition book. We only printed 500 copies, and I think, you know, most of them are almost gone. So it's also a book that you want to keep, that you want to collect. You know, Tony was talking about our cultural legacies. You know, wouldn't it be great to have a book, the first chapbook that, I don't know, Juan Felipe Herrera published, or one of your favorite poets, you know? I would have loved to have the first chapbook by Tomas Rivera. And I do have it. Actually, a friend of mine gave it to me. I didn't know Tomas Rivera wrote poetry. Did anybody know that? Well, only one person. You know. And a friend of mine gave me a box of books, and Tomas Rivera was, I'm like, oh my God, cool. So that's what I mean about those type of literary treasures, you know, that can, you know, that have a lot of significance for us who love books and reading. And Jen's book, you know, I mean, if you read it, it's gonna. This is what I wrote. I feel like I know it, but it's about sons and daughters. Every time I read, you know, good poetry, it always opens possibilities of meaning. The last time I said one thing about it, this time I'm going to say something else. Because that's what good poetry does, right? Poems that have, that open doors for you every time, and windows every time you read them. That's why we keep returning to the same, you know, some of us keep returning to poets that we love all the time, because every time we read a poem, something else happens to us. It changes us in a different way. More, and the book refuses to be changed. It can't be changed. We are the ones who change. But the book is about sons and daughters, about what it means to be a mother, about what it means to be a daughter, and what legacies we inherit and what legacies we pass on. It's about the body, the human body, a woman's body, a man's body, the body of the universe, and what it means to love it. And I think throughout, the implied, implicit question is, how do I find the language to love my body? And by doing so, dispel any negative notions that I have inherited, either because of, you know, social legacies or familial legacies or cultural legacies. That's what this little book is about. So with that said, welcome, Jen Yáñez-Alaniz.
Octavio, will you please hand that paper over to Irene? Because the last time you wrote a really beautiful intro, you lost it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you. So, wow, I'm really happy to be here with everybody. It's very exciting. I see a lot of people who have been part of my poetry community for a while, starting with my mentor. Can y'all hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. Starting with my mentor, Dr. Carmen Tafolla. Yay! Some of my peer mentors, Irene, Veronica, And then my poetry coach is here. And just to kind of make a clarifying statement, John has been with me in the process of putting the manuscript together in very gentle ways, guiding ways, just sort of asking me questions, asking me to reflect, challenging me. But the buck stopped with Octavio. He didn't mess around. As my editor for the chapbook, he read through it with a very critical eye, and because he is familiar with some of my writing and some of my readings that I've done in the past, he knew how deep I could go in my poetry, and so he really took that opportunity to challenge me further. And so I'm really, really thankful for that, Octavio. I appreciate it. And so Octavio pretty much said everything I would have said about the poetry collection. I won't say much more about it. What I would like to do, though, before I break open the book, is I would like to read 2 poems that will be part of my forthcoming book, and that'll come out early 2025. And so it is a fuller breadth of Surrogate Eater is what it is. I go even deeper into the themes of Surrogate Eater, and I visit, sort of more parts of my life, more parts of community, more relationships, and I go deeper into the themes of the body, the mind, spirituality. So again, these 2 poems are for the forthcoming manuscript or book, but what I will say is this. In general, when I write poetry, especially as a collection, and it's something that I learned through my mentor, is I like to move through healing, and I love transformative spaces, right? I don't like being stuck in trauma, and I don't like the idea of keeping readers stuck in trauma. But with that being said, I'm going to put you in trauma right now, and I won't transform you out of it until Surrogate Eater. Requiem for a Mother. My skin sits too close to the edge. The soft leather of the armchair is too inviting. It easily holds me down. It keeps me complacent. It keeps me from heavy walks up the stairs. I walk death legs step by step, transparent as funeral lilies, to the landing. I stop before I reach the doors. I lose my footing. One foot flies off the edge. My husband falls toward me from the sky as he dies. I watch in horror. I take on the length of another to distract me. His name doesn't matter. The dead live in my home. They walk the hallways disguised as my lovers. I am thick-mouthed and wanting. A loaded pistol sits on the dresser. It calls for my curiosity of death. I walk the death line to my bedroom. I stand in my vanity. Diamonds, handcrafted metals, precious gems. I collect and collect and collect beauty. My beauty, burnt curls at the edges, skin thin, hair thin, translucent, aging moth gray. I ask the nameless lover, which way is home? I don't go home, not yet. I count my children. All of them have grown. They are gone. I count the years that have passed. I find peace at the pillow. I splay the thin gray of my hair across soft cotton. I hold the nameless lover's head at my hips, at my swollen angel. I forget. Death hums in my throat. Thank you. Sorry if I didn't say it sooner. Content warning. Sorry. In the vastness of this bed lies stillness. The laughter of children down the hall is gone. I am left desperate to awaken from a dream. such distance. I am 21 and in love, but the mirrors are shattered. I have not seen my reflection in 30 years. A dog-eared book lies tattered, bulked in my hands. Every page swells wide with wedding gowns, cake, and Bible scriptures, sacred and condemning against divorce. My breasts are tender and heavy with warm milk. I am wet between the legs, but my groom is old. He sits at the edge of our bed, and I need only to wake him, to call him my love, the man I knew when I was 21. But he sleeps within the shaking shoulder blades of this man who shares my bed. He is lost to the furrowed brow, to the shriveled bird in the fist. From the unwinding music of an empty bassinet, I hear the sorrowed song of a lullaby reaching to comfort my infants. A pillow is pressed against my chest, and it smothers. Yet my tongue continues to sing of the moon for my children. My book of marriage is gone. I only feel the clutch of a toddler's dress at my heart. A toddler nowhere to be found, now grown and married. I wake. I am dry between the legs. My breasts lay flat against my chest. In the empty space between us on our bed, I reach for my husband's hand. I tell him that I am lost and afraid. He says that he is too. He unloosens from my grasp, exhales a tense breath, and turns away. Thank you. My legs are shaking. So there's a lot of new faces here, a lot of familiar faces who've heard a lot of the poetry, but this is one of my favorite poems, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. Again, I won't offer too much information as I read, except to remind you, content warning, patron saint of moist things. I must be a mermaid. I have no fear of depth and great fear of shallow living. Anais Nin. When I pray for love, I imagine our youth in Anais Nin, her wet verses underneath our tongues, her sex and unguent between our bodies, my tempered knees tender and buckling at your waist, seeking salve and chrism. In my surrender, in my memory, you untie the blue ribbon from around my thigh, your teeth releasing the knot. My openness tastes of fig and tamarind, glistened cadence on the tongue. I don't know you without the warm sun, without summer's rain arced above our bodies, without the milk-like sky anointing us with grace. I long for your witness to my sanctity. I long for your witness to my breasts, swollen like a sea of darkness. To be born a son, we build a castle around his seating as he grows. He is taught to keep one foot tilting the pedestal, his palm a foothold for his queen. His birth, the season's harvest, bears no thought for fallen fruit. His sisters bloom into shifting hips and nectar of nourishing sexuality left to redden hot and bleeding in the garden. His biceps and genitals, the celebrated centerpiece we devour at family feasts. Thank you. Sonnet for Hunger. You held it on your tongue, ran outside to dip it in dirt when the rain's damp earth was too much to resist. You dangled hunger between your teeth and tilted your head toward the sun like a prayer. The neighbor reported to your mother, said you looked odd and sprawled, gaping wide toward sky. So you hid and pressed your lips against your bedroom wall, an angled space behind an open door, subduing hunger. Your mother cried at your feet, wound a rosary around your wrist, pulled you to your knees to pray, when the break in your ribs ached and ached. Thank you. I'm going to read something a little softer now. This is a poem that I wrote for my daughter. Your body as Yol Ignal, for my daughter Marive, born from a star. A tub filled with warm fragrance keeps your history, your submergence royalty, a Mayan queen. You uphold 10,000 births, your palms an ascension. In your wet fingers you reign in your energy. The wash cleanses but does not displace. Naked in your skin, you are unending. Thank you. So just for a little bit of reference, Yol Ignal was the first known recorded female warrior leader of the Mayans. And she came to me in somebody else's poem. And at the time, I think I was searching for an energy to parallel my poetry, to parallel in a way that would strengthen me as I went through the process. So Yol Ignal, you know, I talk about paradoxes of sensuality, surrogacy, and consumption in my poetry. And in this case, I feel like Yol Ignal and I adopted each other somewhere here with us in the cosmos. Am I doing okay on time? Yeah, good, okay. So back to trauma. Running, invasive memory. I know of sin and shame, the obligation of silence in my body. The red ribboning loom of womanhood, proem to my suffering. I am beatified by Mother Mary as I run. Holy, obedient girl of intact hymen. I pray for the licentious lust of Mary Magdalene. I want the hunger of a woman abandoned for fucking, the dishonor of breasts and disgrace of thickening clitoris. I want to suspend the red ribboning loom of my womanhood, of sin and my sex. I run miles to reach my bones, my ribs, my altar. Thank you. Deluge. We escape the night of our homes, the softness where we dream with our spouses, the perfect constructs of our offspring. We gaze beyond the pink moon into her shadows, hidden spaces where we touch without boundaries of skin or restrictions inflicted by marrow and bone. We didn't want to drown. We opened ourselves to the darkness, submerging our bodies, unable to lap the deluge. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read probably one of the most challenging poems of the collection. I think I fought with John over this poem several times about whether or not I wanted to include it. And then I fought with Octavio a little bit, and I realized, you know, that this was very important a piece to the collection. What my mother cannot feed me, hunger by proxy. I am wide open, suspended, a pink beast hanging from the sky of an overpriced hotel room. A stranger waits on my bed, begs my descent. He wants to be fed, but I cannot feed him. I fly across a hall to a bedroom. It no longer exists. I cry out to my mother. I want to feed her what I cannot eat. Collapsed on the floor, she begs to be fed, but I cannot feed her. My mother stretches her neck, unhinged. She widens her jaw. I keep from her swallowing all that she denies me. My hips starved and severed breasts. I choke. I release, rope and hoist. My body hangs from the bleed. My body flings across the ceiling. I want to return to my stranger. I need to be fed. Mother, consume me. Thank you. I think I'll just read one more. Tony, my good. One more. Okay, one more. Short and sweet. The burden of Mary, transubstantiation. 7 sorrows, 7 crimson rivers gather at my feet, where a mother lays her burden, fatigued and split in 3. The pills become my rosary beads. I swallow the hands of Mary. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Was that awesome or what? We're about to take some questions. We'll take 3 questions for extra credit. I know some of you want to get extra credit. So, but as we convene and chat with our friends, I do want to remind you just how much work it takes to defy all the barriers that insist that our people don't want literature or deserve literature or still have a story to tell. It's ongoing, it's 24/7. So I want to give you a little insight into the hard work. You saw the great poetry. You know, se quemaron las pestañas escribiendo estos poemas en la noche, día tras día, peleándose uno con otro también, híjoles, ¿verdad? It's like, but this is worth fighting about and for. It takes that much work. It takes that much work to publish it, to distribute it. And there's not many Latino bookstores in the country because it takes a lot of work to get this structure going. So I do want to thank our fearless leader, Cristina Bailly, who's behind over there doing even more work. Because this bookstore exists as part of the entire complex. I want to give a shout out to Alma Piña, who's the bookstore manager. Round of applause for her, por favor. And I mention that because, you know, we grow up wanting to be the great Chicano writers and poets. I don't know too many people that grow up wanting to be the great Chicana bookkeepers, you know, or the great Chicana accountants. We need them. It is this not as glamorous part of this that honestly, I would be terrible at. You know, hey, these numbers don't add up, Tony. ¿Qué importa? Don't worry about it. We're libro traficantes, por favor. All right, great Chicana accountant in the room. We summoned you. Very good. But I say all that. Additionally, this bookstore exists because the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center owns this building. This is our land. This is our territory. This is our bookstore for that reason. It stays open for that reason. That's legacy as well. And I say all that too because the The other thing is, you read From Blood In, Blood Out, right, Bato? Right, Bato Loco? That's right, Bato. During Cine Festival. Oh yeah, the Vatos from the film were here during Cine Festival. So that was a packed event. That's what this facility is. It's not just one art form. We blend them all, mix them all. Behind us is additional artwork. I say all that because as we get to our Q&A period, how can you support the folks here? You can support the poets, the writers by buying the books. And I'm abusing my role as literary curator because this is limited collection. I bought 3. What's up? I bought 3 already. Abusing my power. Okay, no te pongas celoso. And of course, I'm giving one of each to my boy Rodrigo Bravo, our sound engineer, because it's his birthday yesterday. And I say all that because that does help. And if you tell folks to come during the week to pick up a book, that goes a long way. And it does go a long way to help the poets and the writers. On that note, I would like to bring Jen and Octavio back up so we can ask 3 questions. You get 25 points extra credit on the final exam and a free pass on a quiz for your questions. And this is a little more difficult for the podcast. I'm sorry, the live stream. Rodrigo, you still want to try and live stream it? We just repeat the questions? Okay. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll repeat the question. Maybe we might be a little redundant, and then just so the people watching can participate as well. So if you both can kind of come up here. Así no les gustan el limelight. Come on, to the spotlight otra vez. Por favor, por favor. And we'll take. So the question was for Octavio, a little bit more about the mission of A La Brava Press.
So A La Brava started in 2018 when I was looking for a publisher to publish frontextos. If you're not familiar with frontextos, they're visual poems. As a matter of fact, Irene's new book has a frontexto on the cover. And I printed, I printed 4 chapbooks, 50 copies each. I would sell them like at readings because I was tired of reading from if I go missing. And then Rooster Martinez, Rooster, he had a great little chapbook, and I'm like, hey, well, let me see what I can do with it. So we worked on it, and we printed 150. They're all signed and numbered, and the idea is to give value to something that many people don't value, right? And that's how it started. And I'm learning as I go. I'm learning about the business because I was just talking to a friend about how being a poet is one thing and being a publisher is another thing. As a poet, you want to give everybody your book. As a publisher, where you invest your capital, you want to get back so you can get what you invested, but also to keep the business going. Otherwise, you can't do it. I can't get money out of my paycheck because my wife will get really pissed off at me to publish books. But the mission is basically to give a platform to up-and-coming writers and established writers for them to, especially for established writers, to do a little project that otherwise they would not do. I was talking to a poet from here, we're still talking, but I said, hey, you have this really couple of great books, you have a novel, do something, just out of the blue, something fun and we started talking, and I'm like, why don't you, I gave her a list of things, and I'm like, why don't you build a book out of those strategies? You know, like, how do you tell a story with receipts and photos and scrawlings and scribblings? You know, how do you tell a story with those type of what I call poetic strategies and visual elements, not just text, right? That's for the established writers. For those writers who are up and coming, or like Jen, I think this is her first chapbook. It's an opportunity for them to have a platform. For La Brava is just me and a person who helps me design the books. So all the efforts of promoting the book and stuff like that, it's really just us, But look at us, you came to see her and you heard her poetry, and she's learning about her own work by doing this type of readings, So that's part of the mission for, poets in our community to not feel like they're just writing for themselves. That maybe, hey, you know what? If A La Brava is publishing that type of work, maybe I'll get published too, stuff like that. So that's what we're doing. Yeah.
So the question is to both poets, how did they choose the words on the covers? And the title, Surrogate Eater and If I Go Missing.
So mine was kind of easy. Among many things, the poetry discusses generational trauma related to eating disorder and just sort of negative legacies that act against the human body. I thought it was about women, but as I wrote and as I reflected, I realized that these are issues that also affect men. So, and Surrogate Eater there's a title poem called Surrogate Eater, and it's about two friends, and one of them is a surrogate eater for the other who refuses to eat. And so she becomes the eater for that person, surrogate eater. And you didn't ask, but this cover, I fell in love with it. Irene brought it to my attention. The artist is Paula Lopez. She's out of Santa Fe. And I loved it. I mean, there's a lot of Aztec and Mayan symbolism here, but if you just kind of look at it, it looks like intestines, and it looks like a stomach, and it looks like a mouth. So I felt like all of these things related to the poetry. It relates in much deeper ways, but that's a conversation for another time. But that's a great question. Thank you.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. So these are limited editions. This is the one you're going to sign for me. And from now on, whenever you're at my house and I pull this off the shelf, I'll be like, yeah. And then Jen was explaining the title at the Latino Bookstore back in August 2023. So hold on to this one, por favorcito. So.
They're all numbered. That's right. They're all numbered? Yeah, all the books are numbered and signed. Yeah, the title is, for me, titles are the last, I mean, they're so hard for me to get. The Book of Wounded Sparrows went through a bunch of them. I think Sheila, because we bounced ideas about it. And If I Go Missing, the last poem in the book is called If I Go Missing. And as I wrote the book, I was like, what is going to bring together the narrative, what title? And I couldn't get it. And then at the end, I'm like, If I Go Missing. And I think it has to do, I think I mentioned before that the new book is everything I wanted to say in this book. And I think the title evokes that, once, what happens to what happens to you when you live your country, your folks. Once you cross a river, everything you are stays behind, you know. But it also, there's poems about just immigration and people going from one country to another, you know. And also it evokes the idea of how we go missing from ourselves. You know, I think that's I don't know, the more I guess metaphysical idea in the book. Oh, the art. A friend of mine, an artist from Kentucky. I reached out to him. You know, we were connected on social media, and we had friends in common. I had never met him. I've never met him face to face, but we're connected. And I said, "Hey, I like your art. You want to do something for the book?" And he did. And what he did was he put a bunch of canvases on the floor, covered them with dirt and leaves and all kinds of stuff, and then you know, over the paint. And the paintings is basically a really awesome. Oh God, what he called it? But it went missing. It's like a river, how it turns and goes like that. There's a term for it. That's what you call it. So that's what it is.
Hold it up at you.
Yeah.
That's mine now.
Yeah.
Hold on to that. That was what I'm going to give. We'll take the last question. You're tricking us. It's a two-part question, but go ahead. So for the folks on the live stream, there's a two-part question for Jen. One of her poetry readers is stunned to find out she's working on a book. What's up with that? And then secondly, you're asking, well, what about folks that are publishing their books later in their ages? Because typically the younger poets perhaps are lauded in the outlets that exist. You're asking to put that in context.
Okay, so here we go. So Flower Song Press and I have been having conversations for quite some time now, but I had never felt ready or, you know, to bring a full manuscript together. And so one of the wonderful things about A La Brava Press and Octavio was that he was willing to work with me where I'm at, you know, and which meant a smaller collection that I could really bring a lot of attention to. And at the same time, I could, I guess, get the courage to share the poetry because the content is pretty serious. So so we're looking at 2025, and Flower Song Press, and it's basically, I mentioned before that it's a fuller breadth of Surrogate Eater, and it's going to include micro essays that connect a little bit to feminist theory, and it's called Taking It Deeper. It's okay. You're meant to giggle. Taking It Deeper, Evaluations of a Surrogate Eater. And so the other really beautiful thing about this is that because Paula and I have been getting along so well, and we continue to have a conversation with the poetry and the cover art, and now more art, we're actually going to be collaborating, and we're going to be including more of her artwork. So it's it's very exciting. Yeah. and honestly, all thanks to Octavio, you know, for creating this space for me. And what is it like to be publishing after the age of 13? As a mature woman. Well, for me, it was important. I mean, first of all, I was in no position before to publish anything. I think while the last 10 years I've been writing, I think it's been the last 10 years where I've really gotten serious about the poetry, and I've been building a strong community around the poetry, which is one of the reasons why I was able to keep writing, right? When you have so many people around you, guiding you, encouraging you, it's hard not to get ready for publishing. And then along the way, I meet amazing folks who work with me, just almost side by side, like my mentor and my dear friends and my poetry coach. And also, just FYI, Octavio mentioned that he had heard some of my poems before, and it was because I sent them to him too. I was like kind of brave, and I was like, "Hey, what do you think?" And we all know how busy he is, right? Yet he took a moment to look over the poetry and to give me a few, ideas. And it meant everything to me ever. And I was so thankful, maybe the first two times he did it. And so he said some of the most important words to me ever. And I think it's part of what kept me going. He said, "Yeah, if I didn't give a shit, I wouldn't have said anything." Yeah, pretty good. How beautiful is that? Well, I love being older in age because a lot of my poetry centers on my children and my relationships. And I needed all this time to be able to write about relationships and also to have the strength and the courage and the language to write about relationships, especially when it comes to mature themes like sex and sensuality and things like that. So awesome questions. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. We're going to get our book signed now, and we'll also have an after party if you want to join us on the first of many stops tonight. Vamos a andar parrandeando. Poetry Stop con Octavio invited us, but we're really celebrating the legacy of Dr. Sigley, the legacy of Ada Brava, and our new friends. And I will not abuse my place anymore. Just sign mine two first, and then the other two, I will wait till all of you have your book signed. So please, if you want to come up now, get your book signed, you can buy them at the counter over there, and then get them signed here. Gracias. Thank you all for coming. Gracias. And thank you all people tuning in. Gracias. Like